For many super fans of the Fast and Furious movies, the ultimate dream is having one of their movie cars for themselves. And why not? Driving one of those cars is a dream come true for many people, but for most, the dream is out of reach, but it doesn't have to be. The problem is the prices of the actual movie cars, the cars that we actually used in the movie, have skyrocketed in the last few years. Prices are just getting crazy. I mean, we're talking supercar territory for some of these cars. When these screen used cars go to auction, they regularly fetch $100,000 or more. Some of them have fetched over $500,000, and that makes these cars out of the reach of most people, and it's really sad. But if you would like to drive around in your own Fast and Furious car, here are some important tips to help you create a replica Fast and Furious car, pretty much as good as the movie car, but for far less. We're going to get into that right after the break. I don't know if you know this, but I actually now have a merch store, and if you haven't checked out the video description below my videos, then you're missing out. Currently, I've got a pack full of movie quote t-shirts, and more styles are being added every month, and new items are in development right now. So have a look, see if there's anything you like, and wear it with pride. The link is in the video description below. So today I'm going to talk to you about how you can build your own replica movie car for a fraction of what the actual movie cars cost. Believe it or not, it's been done. There are thousands of people around the world who have already built their own copies of movie cars from many different movies, including the Fast and Furious. First, you need to understand something. When you're looking at a car in a movie, you have to understand that there are multiple copies of that car that you'll see in different scenes. For example, in the first movie, although they used my Supra as the hero car, there were 7 copies of that car, and each one you'll see on screen in different parts of the movie. For example, sometimes you'll see the hero car, my actual car. The rest of the time you're going to see a backup hero car, or you're going to see a stunt car or a process car or whatever. So why 7 copies? First off, there's the hero car. A hero car does not mean it's being driven by the hero. It doesn't mean that that car is dedicated to the hero of the movie. It refers to the nicest, shiniest, most functional car. This is the car that they need to stay pristine. There's often a backup to this car, so that backup car would be designated a hero 2, and then you have stunt cars. There may be 2 stunt cars or 7 stunt cars. It depends on how many crashes they're going to have, how many cities that they're working in the same time, because first unit could be working over here, second unit could be working over here, and of course how many times they're going to crash the car, that kind of thing. Then they have something called process cars, which are usually mounted to some sort of platform like a MIC rig like we did in the first movie. The actors basically sit in a shell of a car, and it's mounted on a trailer. And on this trailer, there's cameras and lights and a generator to power all that stuff. That kind of practice goes back more than 50, 60, 70 years. And you used to see it on 1970s TV show like Chips and Rockford Files and all that kind of stuff. So while the hero cars get all the good stuff, the stunt cars are often missing parts that the hero cars have. A good example is the Eclipse. You see 2 different gas caps on the car, depending on which car you're looking at in which scene. So if you're taking a screen capture of your favorite car from the movie, you need to make sure that you're looking at the hero car if that's what you're going for. So otherwise you're going to be using the wrong reference to build your replica. Things like how they molded the body kits into the stunt cars versus the hero car. So you got to be careful about that. With what the internet it is today, you would think it would be easy to go online and order the parts with a swipe of your credit card. Nope. Not even close, actually. In reality, building a replica today is harder and more expensive than it was to build the original movie cars, and that's largely because of the price of what these cars are going for and the rareness of the parts. Yet, about 20 times a week, I get people DMing me on my Instagram saying something like, "Hey, I want to build a replica. Where do I get the parts?" Pep Boys, bro. It's not at Pep Boys. Here's the problem. The problem is that more than 95% of the parts for these cars are no longer being produced, and they've been long sold out for like 10 years or more. So there is no one store or online parts seller that can sell you all the parts. As a matter of fact, you'll be hard pressed to find any seller anywhere that can sell you even one of the parts. There are a few exceptions, of course, like the nitrous bottles, which have been in production for, 30, 40 years. But the best example is the wheels that are used on Brian's Eclipse. The company that made those wheels was a company called Axis. It's owned by a fellow by the name James Chen. He was actually the best man at my wedding many years ago. And the wheels on the Eclipse were called Axis 7, S-E number 7, and Lenso wheels also used to have an exact copy of that wheel, and they were all made in China by the same manufacturer. Neither one of those companies are selling those wheels anymore. A few years ago, I spoke to James Stent, and I said, how many wheels did you sell? He said, we sold 500 sets total. Axis sold a total 500 sets of those wheels total around the world. And the bolt pattern, as you probably know, is very common. It's a 5x1 14.3, which fits many, many cars. So in the entire world, there were only ever 500 sets of those wheels for the entire world population. So that was rare then. And today, I'm aware of more than 100 Eclipse replicas around the world, and all of those people have either purchased from that original batch, or they are desperately searching the entire world on the internet for people who are selling those wheels. A lot of them wound up in junkyards with crushed cars. Other cars got crashed and destroyed the wheels, and so there's smaller and smaller inventory around the world every year that we go by. And so the same thing goes for many of the items you would need to build an accurate replica. Things like the odometer tachometers that were in my car, the VDO gauges like in the Eclipse, Sparco seats and the Sparco steering wheels, pedals, shift knobs, headlights, body kits, trim pieces, all that kind of stuff. All this stuff is very, very rare, and all those items have been sold many years ago, and they are no longer in production. So how are you going to build this thing? Essentially, this means that you're going to have to search the internet all over the world, and unfortunately, if you haven't mastered the power of Google search and you don't know how to type in your search, it's going to be very hard for you. I'm going to give you some tips, but before that, I'm going to give you some very important advice. When building a replica, do not buy a car until you have the wheels and the body kit. There is no replica without the wheels and the body kit, okay? These are the two most important items to make your car look even remotely accurate to the movie car. If you can't get those parts, don't bother. Just don't. Otherwise, you're basically going to build a tribute car, so you might as well start with a Saturn SC2, put on some 7-spoke wheels, paint the thing orange, and put some stickers on it, and put a wing on it, and call it a day. If that's what you want to do, then go ahead and do it. You're not building a replica, you're building a tribute, and have fun. If you're committing to building an actual replica, you have to be realistic about your budget. For example, if you want to build a black Civic from the first movie, you could probably build that car for $5,000 total if you find a decent running Civic for cheap. I had a friend who went and bought a Civic for $1,500, did the body kit for about $600, painted the car for about $1,500, and he's got the wing for a couple $100, and he's done. But if you want to build an Eclipse, it's going to cost you upwards of $25,000 to do it right. That includes the car, the repairs you will need to make the car roadworthy, plus the body work, because it's probably going to need some body work, and at least pieces of trim. The interiors on those cars were not very good, so you might have to buy some trim pieces. And don't think for a second that you could slap a body kit on Eclipse with 4 wood screws. The body kit fits poorly, it always has, and it's going to take a quality body shop to fit the thing, not to mention the work that goes into building that roof scoop, which is a lot of work. Full paint jobs are $5,000 in the United States, depending on where you take it. And if you take the glass out when you paint the car, it's going to cost more. I've heard people say, well, I can get a paint job for $1,500. I've seen those paint jobs, and they look like somebody threw a bucket of paint on top of the car, and they just brushed it on with a mop. With few exceptions, but you get what you pay for, especially with painting. So here's a list of the least and most expensive replica cars to build, starting from the cheapest to the most expensive. And understand that this list is compiled based on a lot of things. First off, how much it costs to buy a legitimate donor car, which would be a suitable donor for your project. So let's get into it. The cheapest car to build would probably be the black Civics. Body kit, wheels, wing, paint job, you're done. The next one would be Mia's Integra, because there was not a lot of stuff on that car. If you can find a decent Integra for cheap, then it's basically the bumpers, the side skirts, and the wheels and paint, because you didn't see the engine, you didn't see anything in the interior. You put the graphics on, you're done. Vince's Maxima would be cheap, just because you can buy a 97, 98 Maxima SE with the leather interior for about $2,500. Some reconditioning. If you can find the body kits, you're probably going to spend about $800. The wheels are going to cost you about $1,200 with tires. And then if you do the supercharger, you're going to be into it for $3,500 on top of that. And then if you do the stereo system, you're going to be into it for about $8,000 to $10,000. So now you're starting to get into some serious money. Letty's 240SX, which would be the next car on the list, that car would be pretty expensive, because if you find a good donor 240SX, you're going to spend $12,000 to $20,000. Then you do the body kit, you do the wheels, seats, steering wheel, and a couple things, and you're going to paint, and you're going to be into that car for $15,000 to $20,000. Brian's and Eclipse would be next. Now we're getting into real money. I'm looking at suitable donors on the computer this past week, and I'm seeing cars that are from somewhere $4,000 to $8,000. So we'll call it $6,000. Then you got to do the body kit, the paint, the roof scoop, the tires, the wheels, the wing, the stuff under the hood, the seats, nitrous kit, gauges, and stereo. You're going to be into that thing for $25,000. The Johnny Trans S2000, a decent car is $20,000. One that's pretty complete to nice, they're up more like $25,000 now. Body kit, the wheels, and the supercharger. Technically, the Johnny Trans did not have the supercharger during the movie, after the movie, but that car is going to be a $35,000 car to build, more or less. Next is Hector's Civic Hatch. Because of the engine modifications, the complex paint job, the wheels, the interior work, a lot of fiberglass, a lot of custom painted panels, upholstery, seats, some carbon Kevlar stuff, a lot of gauges and all that kind of stuff. That car would cost about $30,000 to $35,000 to build. And if you can find a decent Civic Hatch, probably gonna have to put a bunch of money into it just to bring it up to spec. So I would estimate $35,000 to $40,000 for that car. Jesse's Jetta, the interior alone on that car is probably about $7,000 or $8,000 at card rate. Then you've got the stereo system is probably another $10,000 to $12,000 for equipment and installation, depending on where you live. Jettas are relatively cheap. The underhood stuff is very complex. Direct port nitrous system, everything was polished or carbon Kevlar under the hood. It was a 2-liter automatic, so it's not a VR6, so buying a Jetta shouldn't cost you more than $3,000 or $5,000. But doing all the other stuff with the big brakes and the wheels and painting it, it wasn't a factory white, it was an aftermarket white, so that car is going to cost probably $40,000. Then you get into Dom's RX-7. Buying a decent donor RX-7 is going to cost you $25,000, $35,000 if it's complete, and then you're going to go through the wheels and the body kit. The interior is basically stock, but if you wanted to build it to movie spec with the stereo in the back, that's going to cost you some serious bucks. So that car come about $45,000, $50,000, and they're going up every day. So next is Leon's R33 Skyline GTR. Buying a R33 Skyline GTR today, they're looking at cars are about $60,000. And they've gone up significantly in the last 2 years. It was a couple years ago, you can get these cars for under $40,000, but they're going up in value because all the GTRs are going up. Next is Dom's Charger. If you find a good one, the prices are all over the place. $30,000 for a basic shell. Complete cars for $60,000, $70,000, plus the engine, which is always $50,000. We know that because Hawaii Racing just built one for the just driven people. So that's very expensive. That's a 6-digit build. Brian Supra, of course, you can buy a non-turbo automatic for about $40,000, assuming it's left-hand drive. Don't even bother with a right-hand drive because now you're just being a dork. The movie was filmed in America. The steering wheel is on the left side of the car. If you're putting it in the right-hand side, then you better be living in England because you're doing it wrong. And if you want to buy a twin-turbo Supra, twin-turbo with an automatic, you're going to pay $60,000 unless you find something with high mileage and a lot of storage. And if you want a pristine car, you're going to be paying 80 plus, and one that's low mileage, you're going to pay 6 digits. So that one's probably the most expensive from the first movie. So this is why so many people are building black Civics and Eclipses, because those are two of the very common cars that people recognize, the Eclipse more so, but they're manageable budget. Even if you do it 100% accurate, it's still manageable compared to the other cars. So the order I've assembled there assumes that you're doing a full replica on the exterior, including the paint, the engine bits, the brakes, the suspension, and the interior stuff, including the stereo systems. So that's how those things are ranked. But despite the cost of building full replicas, there are quite a few who have done it, and they've done it very well. There's a couple people up in Canada, there's a guy in Germany, there's Price Hep down in Florida, James King in Australia, Dave Deshane up in Canada, and of course the team at Just Driven. These people have built some really exemplary replicas. But there's another tier of replica builders who build cars on a budget for a fraction of the price of the movie cars. And how do they do it? Very clever. So what they do is they get the body kits, they get the wings and the wheels first, then they buy the car. Once they get the car, instead of painting them, they wrap them. They use a vinyl wrap on these cars because you can get a wrap done for about $1,500 to $3,500, right? So vinyl wraps are much cheaper than paint and much faster to execute. And today, you can usually find a color that's almost identical to the actual movie cars that you're trying to replicate. So why not do it that way? So most of the people who go the wrap route are usually working on tighter budgets, so they don't usually bother with replicating the engines, the brakes, the suspension, or the interior bits, or maybe they do some of that kind of stuff. So they just focus on the exterior, including the body kit, the graphics, of course, the wheels, proper wing, and all that kind of stuff. But for the average viewer, most people can't tell the difference. I see these guys drive up and down here in Southern California, Team FNF, and most people think those cars are actually movie cars, which they're not. Some go a little further, they'll do gauges, or sometimes they put in some of the engine stuff and all that kind of stuff. People like Kevin Peacock, for example. But like I said, even these lightly done replicas fool 99% of the population. But in reality, and why we call them replicas, they're really more aptly named tribute cars. And tribute cars are built to pay homage cosmetically to the actual car, and they do that very, very well. Like I said, most people can't tell the difference, and that's great. You pulled it off. Replicas are cars that are built to a higher standard and include more attention to detail, and of course it's more expensive. But there's a whole nother level. Recreations. Recreations is a term for cars that are almost faithfully exact recreations of the original car. These are special cars. And there's a small group of people around the world who have achieved that status and this high level of accuracy. The Just Driven team down here in Southern California is one example, having built a recreation of my old Supra and the Toretto Charger. If you're not following them on YouTube, you're missing out on a couple of great builds. James King in Australia, he has a wonderful R34 Skyline GTR, which is a really great example. It's one of the best in the world, if not the best. He also has a beautiful Supra from the first movie, but the steering wheel is on the wrong side of the car, buddy. They drive on the wrong side in the road in Australia, or maybe we drive on the wrong side in here in California, in the United States. Dave Deschain's Supra in Canada is a great example. He went so far as to find the camcorder from 1993 that I had in my Supra. That is attention to detail. And in fact, he's not done yet. I think he's in his third or fourth or fifth revision to make it even more accurate and an even higher quality. So he's killing it up there. Dom Dub up in Canada has built some cars that probably surpass replica status and are probably right in that meat of what we call a recreation. The Maxima he built and then later sold to Jorge Acosta. He had a Jetta replica that was on point, and he had an S2000, which, as I recall, it was good enough to be classified as a full-blown recreation. And there are many more around the world. If I missed you, I'm sorry. I just didn't come into my head. But of course, it doesn't matter which direction you want to take with your build, but to be successful, you have to know how to find these parts. They're all gone. They're no longer in production. So here are my tips. First, go to Facebook and find Fast and Furious replica groups and join them, because, like I said, there's no auto parts store anywhere selling these parts. So this is a good resource to find some parts. Second, go to my website, fastandfuriousfacts.com, and look at the spec sheets of the movie cars from the first movie. I think I have all of them up there, plus some spec sheets from the second movie and the third movie. Third, go to my YouTube channel, which you're already here, and go watch the videos about the cars from the first 3 movies. I suggest you stick to cars from the first film for your replica, because most of the cars from the next 2 movies never really obtained the same celebrity status that we saw with the cars from the first film. Fourth, know the names of the original owners of the cars. Many of the movie cars from the first film were already famous before the movie. People like Scott Sentra, who owned and built the Jetta. That was the car that Jesse drove. That car was featured in Super Street and several other magazines, including some magazines about European cars here in the United States. So you can find online prints of some of those magazines and get more information. And finding those magazine articles can help guide you as to how they built the car way back in 1998 or 1999. Fifth, when searching for parts, it helps to use the part number. Example, JBL W12 GTI, and then add the words for sale. Type that into the search bar and let Google do its search. Then go to Bing, do it as another search engine. Then go to DuckDuckGo, which is another search engine. And don't forget to search on classified sites like OfferUp and eBay for sure. If you're looking for car stereo items, find the car audio forums online and search their classified sections. Number 6, reach out to the original manufacturers if they're still in business to see if they have old stock lying around, or if they have the molds, or if they know of a resource, or maybe they had it produced overseas in another factory, and then reach out to the factory. Remember, many of these parts were first sold back in 1998. If any of them still exist in the used market, they may not be in pristine shape, and they will certainly be expensive. So if you're looking for deals like, oh, I want it for $50 because it's 20 years old, you can kiss that goodbye. That's not going to happen. But the last resort would be 3D printing or fabrication of a non-functional replica part. We were going to do that with the amplifiers for the Just Driven Supra, because we were running running out of options, but somebody else came through for us. But the best thing is owning one of these cars is special. You're going to be famous overnight, but the build will take years, so be patient. And remember, it's a hobby. It should be fun. Thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget to like and subscribe and check out my merch below. We'll see you next time.